Mm.
So it explains to me once again that when we meet, we remember each other, all of us, and we have this subtle connection between each other, all of us. And some of us say, oh, it's a past lifetime. Maybe we've been here on Earth collaborating and so on. But what if, and this is what
Mm.
I'm inviting the audience to look at, what if we met somewhere
Mm.
else? What if
Mhm.
we had
Mhm.
a history in another civilization? What if there was something else? Not about just
Mhm.
me and Adam, but in general, we're approaching this topic tonight and our connection
Mm.
in vaster realms. And thank you for being here and diving into that with me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. And of course, those of you that know my work know it's one of my favorite topic areas, although it's one that I choose carefully who I like to get into it with, because in general, in my work in the world, I'm a CEO of a technology company and I'm a unified physicist, and I'm writing white papers on 1/x mathematics and weak force phenomena and quantum gravity physics and quantum geometry. So there's a field of my work that's always focused on trying to bring new information in, and of course work within the constraints of what everybody knows and believes is possible, and stretch those edges and break the walls and open up new grounds. And then on the other side, you have to still be completely transparent and honest with the reality that, you are a being who has their own individual experiences. And there's a whole area of my life in which I have had countless experiences, hundreds, probably maybe thousands, but at least hundreds of experiences with other people that were profound and opened myself to the understanding beyond the shadow of a doubt, beyond any of the logic, extending the logic that I developed through my youth, to understanding how it is that we're here and getting to know the journey that we are each on and how far that journey goes, both back in time here on planet Earth, as well as eventually I realized and figured out that many of us also came to this planet from other worlds. And this is not just speculation. This is not just channeling. This is not me opening myself up to some messages from the world, but this is me transpersonally tracking the thousands of experiences of other people that I've directly worked with and communicated with, and their dreams, their memories, their the context of things that have come to them, and then of course searching in history, actually finding information that completely backs up that person's memory, that person's experience. My own journey in both dealing with the memories of other lifetimes in my past, and then eventually, studying in history and in different periods of time and locating the exact time periods that I was in, and understanding more, and in some cases even getting my name and understanding who I was in history, for better or for worse, sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing, or not so easy to deal with. But it's a journey of the soul. And as we get in touch with this very personal journey that we've been on through good and bad experiences, and through the traumas we've had, through the lessons we've learned, through the shadows we've healed, we regain a lot of ourselves. We regain so much more knowledge and wealth of experience. And I'd always wondered what it is about things like computers that I could resonate with so well. Like, from the first moment I ever touched a computer, I just instantly kind of knew how to do it and work it. And I was generally teaching my parents, and others how to work with computers. I was fixing computers when I was 13 years old for money on the side, um, and And so that was a fascinating thing for me because, as I got a little older and I started having these past lifetime experiences, I couldn't place that one. I could place how someone could hand me any kind of sword and be able to move with different swords in different ways and feel these different forms inside of my body. That I could understand. But where did I ever have a computer system before? When did I ever have a screen and a piece of technology? And then the other thing that I thought was really fascinating about that experience was, and this sort of like consistent mystery around my relationship with computers and higher technology, is that I always felt like, even today, all the way to the level of computing we have now with VR systems, etc., I always feel like it's extremely primitive, as if the system that I'm used to using is way more advanced than this. And so like I'm working with like a Fisher Price, like toy set computer here now, whereas the systems that I've used in the past, as I came to realize, were much more advanced, leveraging holographic technology, the ability to think and move objects on the screen, and etc. And I started to realize that I was discovering that I had some engineering capacities and knowledge in other worlds before I came to this earth, where technology is much higher, much closer to the future of where we're headed as a species.
Exactly. And I have similar memories where technology can be operated by the power of thought. You don't have to operate it with your hands or using the device. You can command your vehicle to the direction you want it to go. You can command it's not even called a computer, it's something else that interacts telepathically with you and displays images holographically, and displays solutions directly to your mind. Doesn't have to be on the screen. And various other technologies that are not on earth, like suits who adapt to your temperature or body shape, or enlarge and enlarge if needed, or change structure if needed, according to even if it's daylight or nighttime, and stuff like this. And not to mention that in other civilizations where I operate, you don't need to travel with vehicles if you don't want to. You can just transport your body from one place to another at the power of the thought, with all your luggage and with all your ship if you want. And in intergalactic traveling is not done by traveling thousands and thousands of year lights, but just with the power of intention, selecting the direction, and then you're there. And so much more than makes it here so much boring. And honestly, like, this is my life. I'm in all vulnerability, sharing what I feel. And so having had these memories all for the past 10 years even, and how relationships work in other civilizations, and how sexuality works, and how sharing the information works, and how sharing resources works, and how the houses are, and all this stuff is like, why aren't we able to do here the same thing? And why aren't we collaborating, all of us, like we're collaborating there? So there's so much stuff. And having met you with a greater expertise and memories, I'm asking, do you think it is in the past, or is it all now?
Well, that's the ultimate paradoxical question. Not so easily answered, but I will give you my my thoughts on that and my sense of that. But I first want to just say that I'm sure that a lot of people that are watching this can relate to that sense that you're talking about. The kind of feeling like, geez, when are humans going to get it together? Like, come on, guys, catch up already. Like, why are we still stuck in medieval consciousness culture, and behavior around whatever, races, sexes, intimacy, like you name it. So the sense of the culture that we're in being behind the field of where we know it's needing to go and supposed to go, I think is pretty pervasive. And in answer to your question around time, it's one of my favorite topics, and I won't go into extreme depth around understanding time from a physics standpoint, but I will say that there's a couple things that are extremely important to understand about time and around time. That in terms of the unfolding of mass, energy, and matter in the universe, and the way that events occur in the stream of what some people would call the 3D, or the physical worlds, the gross worlds, this plane of existence operates through momentum in general. So what that means is that as things occur in the past, there are then changes that happen after that based on those changes before. And it's pretty freaking strict laws in most cases that lead from cause to effect. And so the preservation of the flow of the energy from the past into the present moment is essential, and is really everything that you are is based on everything that's happened before. Everything that you are now, the entire universe, so to speak, has conspired to this moment for you to be here and to be actually conscious of this moment right now, which is an incredible thought on its own. And then, of course, there's the fact that every experience you've ever had has led you to exactly where you are right now. There is no deviation from that. It's everything is happened for a reason to get you right here. Now, happening for a reason, that piece takes a little bit, deeper unpacking in terms of consciousness. But we can say very easily that we're here now, and we've never not been here now. In fact, every moment that we've been before was now at that point in time. But the now is in very much a real sense an intersection point between a stream or a river of how all of the information, everything that's ever happened before, is merging together in this moment right now, right? So it's like a river coming in. I like to look at it from the I Ching standpoint, and I approach it as earth or divine yin. The energy of the past is constantly flowing into us. And the reality is, around the past, we have generally two choices. We can either receive the past or not. And what that means is that you can either accept what has happened or you can deny it. And generally, over time, growth and wisdom in life usually comes along with accepting more of what's happened. And so your life in this time has been about accepting what happened to you when you were a child, and moving through whatever traumas you experienced growing up, and accepting what happened in high school, and realizing you can never change the events and things that happened there, and receiving the learning and the growth connected with that. Now, of course, if you really want to know who you are, has a lot more to do than what happened to you as a kid and even with your parents, because who you are is about accepting this much longer stream, which goes across time, and start accepting those feelings that you had in history class when you were, studying different periods of time, and all of a sudden you flip to one period in Egypt, or you flip to one historical record about the Incans or whatever, and all of a sudden you're absolutely engaged, you're absolutely interested, you want to eat up that information. Whereas when you get to the Civil War, maybe you just want to fall asleep. You just don't, and everybody I know had this experience where certain parts of history have always resonated with them and others haven't. But if you don't inquire why, and you don't explore it, and you don't start accepting that there's actually information in that physiological resonance, then you're never going to get anywhere with it. You'll never find out why that connection's there. But I find that if you do deeply inquire, you start tracking this trail through time into the past. So the short answer is that yes, it's in the past and it's in the present. You're never not in the present, but the past is a very real thing, and it's not something you can go and just change. If you could go and just change what happened yesterday or 10 years ago or whatever, you would disrupt your entire experience of the now. You would disrupt the unfolding of every event between now and then. But what you can change is how you perceive the past. What you can change is how you're willing to see it and look at it and awaken more depth in your experience of it and understanding of it, which sometimes when you realize what's true in the past, you can feel that shift in energy moving through the higher dimensional consciousness fields, what some people call 5D. You can literally feel the shift from your perception about what you did then to now, which suddenly impacts your whole timeline and going into the future. Because it's like you just leveled up, you just integrated a new part of yourself. You're good to go now,
So you've studied and maybe had experiences with intergalactic civilizations. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. We can go there.
I'm moving
So
fast.
short version of a long story is I had some different experiences seeing UFOs when I was little. The first time when I was very little, and huge bright light came over this ranch that I worked, that I was living at with my mom and my stepdad, and blinded me as I'm like walking around this little lake, and it was in the evening, and I like to go outside sometimes, and it's really beautiful after twilight, and this huge light comes by, blinds me, and then shoots off over, the mountains. And it was so intense, I just didn't even know. I didn't have any clue what had happened. And I later questioned if it was a dream. But of course, I told my mom and checked in with her, and she's like, yeah, you saw something out there. I don't know what happened,
And
then
it wasn't Elon Musk's satellites, was it?
yeah,
Now
no, this would have been,
everybody sees these objects.
Yeah,
They're so frequent,
sure.
and I've had them above these mountains every day almost, or very often. And when you shoot pictures or movies of them, everybody's like, oh, it's Elon Musk satellites, or it's a flight. There's no flights flying, guys. Everything is up. What are you talking about? So yeah, go ahead. That's why I've chosen this moment now. It's time for content.
Well, this sky is clearer now than usual, but a lot more messy in general than it was then. And I was living in northern New Mexico at 9,000 feet elevation in a little town called Red River, and there's rarely plane flights over that area because it's just not really in any of the major tracks towards big airports. And this was definitely not a plane. No planes come down to low altitude and then blind you with brilliant light, totally silent, and then shoot off faster than, light. So yeah, that was the first thing. And then when I was a teenager, I had an experience with my stepbrothers and my dad seeing a craft. And I get into some of these stories in a lot more depth in my interviews with Ed episode with Ruben Langdon on Gaia, which I recommend people checking out and watching, because I can't, with the time we have, tell the whole story, but I knew that it was possible that there was other beings out there. It was always in the back of my head. And then as I really got into science in high school, I started deeply unpacking the nature of just the numbers, like running the equations, and one of the Drake equations, for example, where I was just testing it out and saying, well, if it's this likely that life can develop on a planet, what's the likelihood that that life would eventually develop consciousness, and how long would that take, and how many planets are there, and how many stars are there, and how big is the galaxy, and then how many galaxies are there. And you run this equation, taking all of these different kind of elements of data, which you can, some of them are pretty fixed and some of them are very flexible. And even then, when I was in high school, which was in the late 90s, I got solutions that were saying, well, there should be thousands of intelligent civilizations in this galaxy alone. Like, even if we're even if we're running the numbers very low, and at least hundreds, like that's going with 0.01% and 0.1% and 0.1%. And so it's, and at that time we thought that, probably less than half of stars had planets. And we also thought that of those planets, to have a planet in the area of the solar system that could produce life would be extremely rare, right? But now we know that over 99% of stars have planets, and that actually over half of all star systems probably have a planet that could produce life. So now you've got 200 billion stars in a galaxy, and almost every one of those has a planetary system. You've got 100 billion potential habitable planets around our galaxy. How much, conscious life do you think comes out of that? And then that's, of course, just our galaxy. And most people don't realize this, but when you pick a pinhead point on the sky and you take a photo of it, like Hubble did, it's the Hubble Deep Field images, in a single pinhead sized spot on the sky, there are thousands and thousands of galaxies. Now, every one of those galaxies has hundreds of billions of stars. And again, there's no reason why the ratio of life and planets and all of that stuff should change. So the idea that we're alone is absolutely ludicrous. And I came to that, conclusion when I was in high school. But then I ended up having a very powerful, very personal experience. And that's the one I tell in depth in that interview I do with Ruben. And of course, it was a 3-hour long interview, 3 or 4 hours long. And so it had to be cut down a lot, just to get across really what I needed to share. But that experience was initiated in a state which was direct physical contact. So I couldn't deny it. It wasn't just a light in the sky. It wasn't just, a vision or a dream. It was a physical extraterrestrial being standing in front of me. And that was the moment where, in that experience, a lot of things shifted for me, because it's kind of like, when you get data that you can no longer question, like when you come to a conclusion and it's so solid and everything in your whole world fits together better because of it. Yeah. And it's so profound in terms of your internal integration that goes on in those moments, that it changes you. And for me, I realized very clearly that I'm not from this planet and that I'm from other worlds. And I began having lots of memories and experiences and contact experiences, more and more and more, that and meeting other people also, lots and lots of other people, finding many other ambassadors and people that had different contact experiences like me or different from me. And I started really putting together the pieces of the puzzle and realizing, wow, I'm actually part of a fleet of beings that chose to come to this planet at different stages in time. And that my particular crew, my soul family of homies, so to speak, really just wonderful friends that I'd had and built friendships with across the galaxy for many, many lifetimes. A lot of us decided to come here either, in the height of Lemuria, just before the Ice Age and the rise of the Atlantean civilizations, or during the Ice Age and during the Atlantean civilization. And this was not that long ago. This is 13,000 years ago. Not that long ago in my sense, but for most people on Earth, that's before history that we even have, you know, of like modern civilizations. Um, and and a lot of what was going on that planet, on the planet at that time, is lost to our history now, because, well, for several reasons, but one is because the ice age did end, and when the ice age ended, and, you know, accompanied with a little shifting of Gaia's plates, you have volcanoes and earthquakes and tidal waves and lots of water, and we lost a lot of what was around, you know, during that time. But there's still lots of places where that civilization is right in front of our faces. And that's one of the reasons why I've done these expeditions in Egypt and Peru and Mexico and other places around the world. Hopefully in Greece coming this fall, because there's definitely some amazing remnants there, and I'm hoping to take a group to Greece with me.
And pyramids also.
Yeah, well, Egypt, of course, yes.
No, but also Greece has pyramids, as far as I know. And
Oh, really? Yeah.
it's part of a very important line that's called the planetary anahata, that actually starts at Mount Olympus, and it spirals mostly through Romania, you know, after Medjugorje and some other places. It spirals through Romania, and it's one of the most potent lines in the planet that I know of. So keep me posted on that. And
Absolutely.
I want to mention, Adam, that you have unlimited time with us tonight. So as long as you want, you can talk. It's just not a limit to to our love in this gathering. You know, everybody loves you, so we give maximum time for what you have to share, because it's very important for humanity now. And it's time to wake up, guys. It's time for contact. We're getting prepared now. We have our educators in place, people who can tell us what's what. Just, you know, be prepared to forget everything you thought you knew. That's all.
Yeah, it's a good time to upgrade your understanding of what's going on, and it definitely helps to do that work in the self, especially in a time when we're dealing with a huge amount of confused and tangled information. There's a lot of disinformation being propagated right now at very heavy levels, and a lot of a lot of a lot of information flows that I would say are a little bit dangerous and can very much disrupt someone's own internal self-development process. But I would say that, you know, the beauty is that because we're all powerful sovereign beings, we can all choose to come back to center. We can all choose to come back to what we know is true, the orientation at the core of who we are. That's the ultimate sort of thermometer, so to speak, or barometer, you know, that can guide us in our journey through life, is coming back to the core of the direct experience of truth that we have. And I think it's really valuable for us all to do that at this time, because that's the place where we unite. That's the place where we come together. You know, if you find that you're digesting a lot of information that's causing you to want to be in conflict with other people, and causing you to hate other people, causing you to judge other people, that's probably information that's not super healthy for you. And it's also probably not the whole truth. The whole truth generally tends to encompass why and how it is that people do things, and incorporates all the things they've done in the past, right? So you can't just we have to hold the wholeness of self in our perspectives. And and so it's a really important time to develop that deeper sense of truth in us, so that we can navigate through these waters. And for me, you know, I found that by understanding this fact that I am not from this world, and that I chose to come here a long time ago, and that I've been human many, many times, And I've worked through a lot of my stuff, my karma, and my experiences of my lifetimes here on Earth because of the wonderful help and presence of so many beautiful people that I know from different ages and time in all kinds of different ways, as family and friends and lovers and brothers and sisters and knights and priestesses and you name it. And because of them, I've worked through a lot of that stuff I have with Earth, because it's been a very challenging ride here. I mean, incarnating on Earth is no joke. It's a big deal, and you know, that's something that I find can it helps, I think, for people to recognize that there's a strong difference between archetypal association and the kind of parts of ourselves that are working towards being bigger and more powerful and more like a specific archetype of somebody in the past. You know, there's many businessmen who want to be Alexander the Great, and you know, they think that just because, you know, they've accumulated all this wealth and they have like a huge fleet of employees working in giant buildings, that they must be actually Alexander the Great, because I mean, look at how great they are, right? and not only that, but there's lots of people also who, like, you know, have an affinity to Egypt. They're into all, you know, they claim they're Cleopatra. I've heard countless people make these claims, and I have people come to me a lot like that. But I want to really say that it's important to acknowledge when you are in vibrational resonance with the stream of an archetype of consciousness. And those people made massive changes on the planet, so they have big streams. And it's easy to kind of jump in that stream and feel the stream of what that archetype of consciousness is doing and has done on the planet, right? You could think of Alexander the Great as the Aries archetype. You know, you could think of Cleopatra as a Venus archetype. Very easy masculine, feminine archetypes to play with. But for an individual to get to know yourself, knowing your archetypes is important. But also, you may have had, you know, desires to be like Elon Musk, maybe, or Michael Jordan, or, you know, Taylor Swift. Like, you might have in this life, you know, felt this connection to the stream of certain archetypes and people, but your specific experiences are different, right? And your specific experiences are much more gritty, right? Because your experiences are about, you know, actually being in contact with the earth and skinning your knee, you know, and bleeding on the ground and eating the food or not, as it may be, having sex, like the physical, actual moments of your experience have so much more wisdom and information for you than just your connection to archetypes. The archetypes can help you find your direction and find, you know, symbols that you're seeking to grow into. But your particular memories of yourself are so much more rich and important. And when you look into past lives, the thing is that if you don't have memory of the specific aspects of a moment in which you're in a body and you're actually having an experience that's either good or bad or whatever, that's very, very direct and visceral, well, it's probably not your past life then, because your life and your lives through all time are all experienceable through that direct visceral contact of your in the moment, in the now experience at that time of what you felt, what it smelled like, what it tasted like, how your body was, what pain you were in, you know, like every little detail of that is there. It's actually right there. And so I share this with people because it helps people to actually ground the sense of what's happening. It's not like if you're trying to access past lives or even go all the way back to potentially your galactic lifetimes, that you need to kind of like go off in your mind somewhere, like to the past. It's not a process of going out. It's actually a process of going in, and it's about moving back in time the same way that you would go back in time in your memory to think about exactly what you were doing the other day and where you put your keys, right? Like, or going back and fondly having a memory about your time with somebody that you care about and thinking about what that was like, or a place that you visited in your life where you had some food or you had some smell of roses or something that was extremely rich to your senses. These are things that, by understanding what it feels like to go back in this time, you can start to understand and ground what it felt like in those other times. And you can get to know and discern who you are and the kinds of things that you have experienced a lot more clearly.
Yes, and it's good that you mentioned that it's not a going outside or somewhere, but it's a going within. In my therapy, that's called soul healing. What we do is we center people back in their soul, and from that soul center, they can actually watch all the movies of the lifetimes if necessary, and it's seen as from the center. So all the lives are in a circle around. They're not behind or forward. They're just around that center, and you can tap into each one or several at the same time. For example, I am now in a council working on Earth. I am now here talking to you. I am now part of an under Earth civilization, and I'm now in all three of them as me. And it's now. So that's the perception that we invite people to have, like not exiting out, leaving their bodies, out of body experience. Is not that. It's just your center experiencing all. Yeah.
And of course there is out of body experiences and things like that, and those are useful for other means. But if you're working to get to know your incarnations and your embodiment cycle, it's really about going in to your inside of yourself. And one of the mechanisms that I've taught people for many years around this, there's two of the strongest ways I found. Well, there's three really. I'll do three. Three of the strongest ways to access and start working with memories from the past and other times are one, actually doing meditation where you go within yourself and you go back in your memory all the way back to your childhood, and then you go back and visualize what it was like to go back inside your mother's womb. And then you go into brighter and brighter and hotter until you literally come out of the surface of the field of this life's experience, which I look at as like a giant star. And then you turn from that star and you see these other brilliant star points going back into the distance in time. And each one, almost like a constellation going out in space, is a different lifetime. Each one of those is one of your incarnations in the galaxy of your being, so to speak. And so you go back to one of these previous stars, one that stands out to you, and you go into it. You enter through the light of the surface of that star. And I generally, as I go in, I start to see this cascade of light from this bright white to violet to indigo to blue to green to yellow to orange. And then by the time I'm seeing red, I'm actually seeing the environment. I'm like entering it. And I use that spectral dynamic with this too, because it's actually like getting your consciousness engaged into the chakra system that you had at that time. The way that your energy body was operating at that time, which enhances your senses and gets you very much in that present moment. And then I observe, I move forward and back in that memory. I see what I was doing, what was happening, just ask myself questions, exploring, what did I do before this? Where did I go after this? Who did I know then that I know now that's important to me? And, sometimes you'll just get flashes, and sometimes you'll be suddenly in a memory stream of some experience. It might be emotional, it might be intense, it might be beautiful. And then usually what I do also is I ask to find or locate a tool or an object that was important to me at that time. And by finding an object, something that was very precious or important to me at that time, I'm connecting an anchor point that I can then bring back as I come back into this present moment in this time. And now oftentimes I have a tool that I could actually get. So like a certain kind of calligraphy pen or a sword or, a chalice or whatever that actually helps to link me to my experience of that time and will help as a beacon to continue helping me to remember. So that's one really effective technique. Another is that when we have a friend or another person who we have a very deep resonance with, and we feel this, like, I know you from somewhere, actually going and sitting with that person and doing eye gazing, looking to their eyes and letting yourself feel what they're feeling and them feel what you're feeling. And then actually starting to, what I like to say is seeking. And what seeking is where you're in this deep, intimate communion with somebody, and you just start kind of looking at what is familiar about them. And oftentimes what will happen is you'll just see certain things kind of pop into your mind. And it may be in your eyes, but it's oftentimes not just what you see, because your eyes will do lots of crazy things when you're staring at someone. As the energy starts pulsing, you might see different faces as things phase out, and sometimes you lose faces entirely and you go into 0 point. So, your eyes may tell you a variety of things, but don't just be stuck on what your eyes see. Look at what your inner eye is saying and seeing. And that actually starts to, I find, unfold very specific things. And if you're in this practice with someone else, you can either receive for a while and then share afterwards, or you can share while you're doing it. So I've done this many times with someone where I'm like, interesting, I'm seeing a Roman soldier, and they're like, oh my God, I totally have this memories of, like, I don't know, I've always loved movies about Troy and like that time period, and I've always felt that thing. And and sometimes what will happen is as soon as you see something and then they see it, then they see you, and they will often see the part of you linked to the part of them, or you may see yourself in that time as you related to them, if which usually, if you can see each other in that time space, you do. And it's a really powerful place to start going down the road of exploring memory. And for me, I found that as a technique, it's way more effective than just, it's good to get the info by yourself, but for me, like, I don't consider any of my memories to be totally factual unless I can corroborate them and validate them with other people. Because I remember things from my childhood and that may or may not be accurate, but if I'm hanging out with somebody that I was with at that time and we talk about it, they'll have their perspective, I'll have mine, and then we'll see more about the nature of what actually happened at that time and get more access to truth. So yeah, those are two very, very powerful methods of going in and accessing these memories. The third tends to be more spontaneous, and it's usually just about actually tracking those flashes that you have in certain moments. So when you suddenly see a certain thing,
Oops. I'm not sure if everybody else hears you, but I feel we lost you.
That movie now has opened some part of your awareness and vibrated some part of you in such a way that it's emotional, or it's viscerally like affecting you. And a lot of people just are like, whoa, that was intense, and they write it off, they move on. But if you pause long enough to spend some time with what that is that you're experiencing, and you start openly inquiring about what your relationship is to that movie, or to that information, or to that thing that triggered you, what will start to happen, it's kind of like cracking open an old dusty book. Like, it just hits you over the head, and now you're like, whoa, what just happened? And you're like, but if you then like stop long enough and don't just take the book and be like, oh, stupid book, take the book and open it, look at the cover, study the inside, open the pages. What is it about this experience that was intense for you? What parts of it were intense for you? What fits in your life? Like things that you've known, you've thought about, you've felt, fears you've had, that kind of thing that link to this moment. So someone very close to me, for example, just watched the movie Titanic for the first time, and the experience was massively foundation shaking in some ways, for her, because she'd grown up with visceral fears of giant black metallic objects and deep waters, with no idea why, no reference for why. Just all her life just had these weird feelings about giant black metal things, and anytime there's really deep dark water, she's always been like, freaked out by that. And so when she saw this movie, it was massive for her, and took her days to process it, because she realized that she'd been on that ship, and she remembered it going down and the whole thing happening, and a child that she was protecting, that was like, as things went into total chaos. And so if we're willing to follow and pull the thread and explore it and investigate it more, the information we're looking for will come, because it's part of us. It's just really releasing the resistance to it and opening up to accepting that stream coming in.
That's so potent what you just shared, and I love it. And you just gave us a beautiful, class on how to remember past lifetimes, which is
Yep.
awesome and unexpected. And we thank you for this. We also look at the possibility of accessing collective memories, right? Where you have,
Sure.
you tap into the experience of a stream, like you were explaining, where you're no longer feeling, just your own experience, but you might have, you might remember or relive the experience of either a group of people or another person, or a stream of archetypal energy as well. But
Yeah.
let's get back to your discoveries on intergalactic species. What can you tell us about what have you discovered so far? Which are the species that you most relate to, and what can you tell us about this? And how do we relate to them?
Sure. Yeah. Well, now that we've built a little bit of a foundation for that exploration, for others to be able to go into some of this themselves, in my work and exploration, what became very prominent for me after my galactic contact experience, and having an experience with what I call the Galactic Council, which is a collective of beings that are ambassadors to different worlds. And in the council sessions that I experienced, I saw 73 different species. And these different species each, had ambassadors and different levels of interest in what was going on or not, but were present. And these different beings looked like all kinds of things, but there was quite a lot of them, actually, interestingly enough, that look a lot like us. And I started by really getting interested in, if I am from this other world and I'm here and incarnated as a human and I'm able to do that, who else has done that, right? Because I thought, well, if I want to get to know my star family, my galactic family, like I need to understand my human family, like, and how, if I'm here, there must be lots of others like me. And I remembered that there was, but I needed to kind of really investigate that. And so my initial really powerful contact experiences proceeded with 6 different species in particular, all of whom explained that they had invested the most amount of souls into the earth. And what that means is that the most amount of beings from these different species had come here and incarnated here, and not only soul investment but genetic investment. So there was hybridization that went on back in the times of Lemuria in particular, and in ages prior to that as well, where the sun gods and goddesses, etc., the gods and goddesses would come down, and just like in Greek myth, or just like in Egyptian and in Mayan stories or whatever, would interact with and mate with humans and start certain bloodline tracks that were compatible enough with humanity, but also adapted the genetics enough to make the pool of those genetic seeds, so to speak, over the next hundreds to thousands of years, be capable of having different beings from other star systems incarnate into those bodies very easily, right? And so the ones that were the most easy to do this hybridization and this bridging with were those that were closest to our human genetics. And so those species, in particular, the ones that I've tracked that have made those investments, include the 3 that are pretty well known by people and that lots of people have been able to kind of point to, which is the Syrians, the Pleiadians, and the Arcturians. And then 3 that most people have not heard of, and that I generally have been teaching about since around 2005, when I had this galactic, contact experience, and then lots and lots of experiences after, who are the Shiheli, the Yahonians, and the Laquinan Unininan Winea, which I just say Laquinan for short. And each of these different species, beautifully enough, energetically kind of hold a special archetypal field based on their own initiation journeys and the core of the knowledge of who they are. And each one of them have different gifts to bring to this world, and that have brought different gifts to humanity in different ways, which we find in our mythologies, we find in our history, we find in the culture of this planet. Sometimes it takes doing some digging, but some of you have probably heard me talk about the Tuatha De Danann, or also known as Tuatha De Danann, that I talk about, which is these people who showed up in the British Isles, supposedly in all the original stories, riding clouds and bringing with them the 4 treasures from the 3 islands in the sky. And this is like verbatim the way that they expressed and the way the stories were written. And these 4 treasures, basically, each one of them has a specific energy and a specific power. They include the cauldron of Dagda, for example, which is basically like a chalice or a cauldron, and is connected to cups in the tarot cards and hearts in the tarot cards, the spring energy. And a staff, a particular staff that, or spear, which was later believed by Christians to be the spear that pierced Jesus's body. And if you carried it into battle, you would never be able to lose the battle. And a magical stone that supposedly could control the weather and things like that. And later kind of got relegated to maybe it's just this one stone in Ireland or Scotland. Like maybe it's just that stone, that's what it is. But the older stories about it sound a lot more like tales of one of the Arkstones, with the ability to control gravity and matter and etc. And then, of course, the final one, which is the Sword of Light of Nuada. And the Sword of Light of Nuada basically, disappears in history and then reappears as something called Caliburn, and then disappears again, and then comes back in, the stories of Arthurian legends as Excalibur. And so each one of these objects is also one of the suits in the tarot. It's also connected to our playing cards. It's connected to the 4 seasons. They're connected to the 4 directions. This is deep, deep indigenous earth medicine and earth wisdom, coming through from these peoples, who themselves were considered to be fae or gods, as if they came from this other place in this other realm. But they were trying to integrate with humanity and to teach these gifts and bring this magic and this wisdom to people. Now, this is not an isolated thing to ancient Ireland. This is, if you talk to, Lakota elders, which I did prayer runs for world peace and worked with Lakota elders and Wasak and Hopi and, elders of many, many different tribes and groups from all over the United States and Canada. And in those experiences, I, over time, got the courage to ask a lot of these Lakota elders about star nations and star family connections, and was told very clearly that while they don't share it generally, mostly with people, it's strongly believed internally that White Buffalo Calf Woman was from other star systems, and that she came here as star family to teach the Lakota, to remind the Lakota of the sacred rituals and traditions that were part of their lineage, and that these particular 7 ceremonies could help them actually regain sacred knowledge of who they are. So I have countless historical links. We could talk about that for hours, but what's important is to understand that there's, in many cases, likely these very specific streams and threads from these different star families and the different ways that they incarnated into human form and the different hybridizations that were created with each of those branches. And each one of those branches has a root in it of specific culture and specific energy, and that energy and that culture and even the genetics connected with that are identifiable. So I started to realize that I could see people in my life and know what star families they're from. And part of that identification is energetic, but part of the identification is also physical, because you can't leave behind what you've been before. It's always going to be there in you now, some part of it. And of course, many of us have incarnated in many different races, and there are little tiny elements of each of those races in our incarnation and embodiment now. That codex is there. But, just being different races on Earth is not as drastic a encoding as being different species in different worlds with entirely different stars, with entirely different frequencies from those stars, and the nature of that other planet, which is vastly different from Gaia, in many cases. And those markers are really powerful, because you're literally talking about lifetimes in another world, in another star system. And so those imprints are very present, and those imprints you can see through any race, any culture on Earth. You can tell those elements that really stand out from those other worlds.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I just wanted to pause in case you wanted to input or question anything.
you're basically able to identify, and our features here are a mix, you say, of the features that we have in all other civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would now feel to add is that we can actually ask that not only our physical features display as we were before or we are in other timelines, but also our qualities or virtues or abilities, the things that we have.
Yeah.
And we can call this on now, actually, the things that we have already mastered in other lifetimes that are useful for us now, that are useful and beneficial for humanity, can
Yeah.
be are encoded and can be displayed and mastered in this lifetime and remembered and
Mhm.
re-accessed, so that we are the fullness of what we are.
Yes, exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
Love.
Yeah. So, I mean, a few of you've asked me in the past about like what those qualities are and if I could tell star families that I've seen in you and in others. And so I'll give a couple quick tips about the qualities of these beings. And then also if anybody on here watching is interested, you can go to galacticfamily.net, which is a project that I initially created back in 2005 or 6 when I'd first had my contact experiences and I wanted to gather more data. So I created this online community library where people could come in and share about their experiences of different star families. And then I could kind of aggregate those. I could see where people resonate in certain things and which ones are about specific worlds and which ones are whatever. And had a few thousand users in that, and it was built on an old platform. And so eventually I shut it down because it had, it just got security problems and bugs and things like that. So I finally rebuilt it. I haven't opened up the whole thing yet, but the part I've been just building out the library very carefully and artistically for each one of these species, as sort of an offering of my heart to what they've taught me and what they've brought me in my life. And so you can go to that website and just go to discover your star family or click on the discover menu item and then just click on whichever image like really is resonating with you or multiple ones and go into that and read and explore about these different species. And what I found, and the sort of very, very high level summary of what you'll find there is that I've discovered that the Syrian people are basically elves. I mean, the main species in the Syrian system is everything that we've heard and thought about from watching The Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's work. And in fact, when I was in high school, I did a huge project on Tolkien and discovered that he wasn't really even an author. He was a linguist, and he spoke like 7 different languages, and he was working on creating a new language. And as he was creating this new language, he started having dreams and visions of the people that spoke this language. And the people that spoke this language were supposedly the people of the land of eternal sun, who had crossed the great seas and come to Middle Earth to meet with other beings and other species. This is literally the way he writes it in his own words, and in studies I've done of him and people that did biographical work too. And it turns out that language was the Elven language. And so all the stories of the elves that Tolkien wrote about were his best attempts at translating these visions and these things that were coming into him to share with the world. This is why so many people resonate so powerfully with watching The Lord of the Rings, and because he did probably the best job of anyone of actually capturing a lot of the essence of this other culture, which is actually another galactic culture. And of course, in the Syrian system, you have 2 suns. So most of the year, you have daylight all the time. And so what's the nicest place to be in when you've got constant sunshine coming down is in big forests. And what kinds of species thrive the most with continuous light and energy? Trees. So the trees there are massively gargantuan, so big that in some places the forest, it's like nighttime down on the ground. But as you go up in the trees and you go higher and higher and higher, you start to enter this place that's kind of like constant golden sunset, and it's beautiful and misty and gorgeous. And then as you go all the way up, you get to the extremely bright, brilliant skies. And so the Syrians had to learn to master light, because for them to even be able to view the stars and really study the galaxy and study things, and even master energy and their use of energy, they wanted to understand how trees do it, and how do you take light and turn it into energy? How do you filter light and change its color and form? And so on and so forth. And my first dream of actually traveling to another world was traveling to the Syrian system. And it was the system that I lived in before I came to Earth, just before I came to Earth. And I had an observatory there where, when you go inside the dome, the ceiling was such that it would filter out all of the sunlight and let you see out of the atmosphere to the stars. So you could look at these different ceiling panels and see the stars and see different things. But of course, it was technologically augmented too. So I could zoom in and zoom to different places, through commands inside of this observatory, and study things. So if you've got that vibe of the elf inside of you, you feel like you peek in the mirror and sometimes it looks like you've got pointed ears. You just melt anytime the sun is shining through fluttering leaves, and the way that feels. Or when you're driving in a car and you're going through trees and the sunlight's passing through all of them, like how that affects you. And generally love of the forest, the idea that we should be singing to the trees, that we should be building in harmony with the forest and with nature. These are all very, strong Syrian qualities that are easily identifiable, as well as often a high interest in geometry and mathematics, and in particular, the geometry of light, understanding how light works and how light operates. So there's a few qualities for you of that one. Pleiadians, I find, in contrast, while they have a lot of crossovers with Syrians, there's a lot of connection between Syrian and Pleiadian beings. The Pleiadians that are very easily recognizable in human form generally, because they often have these big, deep eyes. Like you can just lose yourself in their eyes, and their sense of emotional empathy is extremely high. And oftentimes when I was doing a lot of festivals, many years ago, I would go around and every once in a while I would see like the 5 Pleiadian women that I knew that were there, and they would just like find each other from across the festival, and then they would go into these huddles and they would start just oming and vibrating, and they would just go into these oming pools for hours. I mean, you come back hours later and they're all snuggled up together, still humming and massaging each other, and like just these like pods of just total vibrational communion. And a lot of that is because one of the main Pleiadian homeworlds is a water world. And so understanding of water and vibration is foundational to their culture. And that also involves relationships with dolphins and whales, cetaceans of all kinds. And dolphins and whales teach and educate actually about sound and how to use sound to communicate in deeper ways and to carry more information in sound. And so through their studies of these animals and sonar, sonic locating, cymatics, all of these different things, they developed the different capacities to control and work with water. James Cameron, in his work called The Abyss, that he released many, many years ago, one of my favorite movies of all time, when they go down into the deepest places in the ocean on Earth and they discover this highly advanced civilization down there, many of the depictions of the kinds of technology that James brought through, I believe, were very clear visions of the Pleiadian peoples. We also see it in George Lucas's rendition in Star Wars Episode 1, where he shows the Gungan tribes and their underwater cities with these bubble world, these bubbles, and you can kind of cross through these membranes in and out of these different bubbles, is very clear depiction of an underwater Pleiadian city. And even, certain depictions of things like Atlantis as expressed through the Aquaman film. All of these are pointing to the Pleiadian people. These were visions of the Pleiadian world. And probably from their own experience in those worlds, they just didn't translate it that way when they wrote their stories or brought the movies out. But we find that generally, for the most part, Pleiadians have this capacity to deeply resonate with the emotional field and to telepathically, psychically tune into what the waters feel like, so to speak, and to change the waters if needed through vibration, through emanation of a new state or a new field. A lot of Pleiadians are, if they're not marine biologists, they're healers. They're often people who are very deeply into healing and into service in healing and transformation of the self. Another good quality to note as well is that Pleiadians have a strong belief that we all individually are guides and guardians of our own truth. So we in ourselves each have the capacity to know everything that there is to know. And so Pleiadians approach education from that standpoint, that it's not just something that you go out and learn, it's something that you discover through exploration inside of yourself. Arcturians generally, I find, have one of a few different qualities. In their humanoid incarnations, it depends a little bit, of course, on the race that they've chosen, but they tend to have the appearance of a little bit darker hair, darker eyes. This is just kind of a natural, innate quality. And it's related to, in the Arcturian homeworld, their star got extremely large, and it's pretty much a red giant. And because of the scale and the size of their star and the heat of their star, a lot of the surface water on their planet has evaporated. And so most of their construction and living spaces and centers are all underground or are inside of protected kind of structures and ships. And they're pyramid builders. So they built pyramids all over their planet. They've helped to build pyramids on this planet. And, the Arcturians have this very, very deep interest in knowing themselves through facing shadow. And what that means is like, as an initiation, someone in the Arcturian system would go deep into the darkness of a cavern and go into darkness retreat and meditation and explore where light actually comes from in themselves. Like, how do you find the light in the deepest darkness? And a lot of those kinds of ceremonial initiations were passed to peoples here on Earth. And we see them a lot in Egypt, for example. And of course, there's a lot of Arcturian influence in Egypt because of these incredible stone structures and pyramids and et cetera. We see a lot of different links to that. And in Tolkien's work, when he envisioned the mines of Moria, these massive underground caverns and spaces, he was very clearly bringing through Arcturian kind of architecture, so to speak. The dwarven architecture is related to Arcturian architecture, although the species of the dwarves is not as close. But that's partially because the Arcturians are vastly diverse, and they've been genetic masters for a long time. So they've been testing and editing genetics and working with different genomes. And so they could look like anything. They could look like different kinds of hybrids with animals. They could have, a variety of different features. But as a root race, their skin was more reddish, aligning with their reddish star. Very stocky, very grounded, darker hair, darker eyes, and a quality that most Arcturians that I find on the Earth have is usually they have set themselves up in some way that they have this really big mission, but they don't know what the mission is, and they've kept themselves from remembering the whole mission until they're ready. And at certain points in time, it's like these little gates unlock, and parts of their mission unlocks, and you know, they purposefully don't remember all the stuff. Somehow they still know, like, you can't stop that soul knowing, but like mentally they've created these blocks to keep them from that knowing until very particular junctures in their lives. And then when they unlock those junctures, the knowing comes with the thinking, comes with the realization, and then bam, they can go at that mission, you know, and fully take it on. And it's a fascinating quality of choice and of being that some people just very strongly, very particularly have. Now, you know, it's important at this point to mention that many people have incarnated as many different kinds of species, especially if you've been a galactic traveler. You might have been Pleiadian one time and Arcturian another time, or whatever, like me. I've been Styrian, Pleiadian, Shiheli, and on to intergalactic species as well, like dragons and Andromeda. But at least in this galaxy, like, I've been quite a few different things, Tierra. So don't think of these as boxes to put yourself in. Think of these as qualities, and in a sense, archetypes that you vibrate with and that you resonate with. Because each of these different star systems, because they have their own frequency sets, because they have their own planetary energies, there's very particular streams of consciousness that are connected to these different worlds. And so you can feel that stream resonating and vibrating, you know, in your genome, in your genetics, and in your body, if you have a relationship there. Do you want me to continue and go through all 6 of these?
If you
Is
feel
this enjoyable
so,
for you?
yes, it's fascinating. People in the comments are really impressed by what you share, and they're sharing that. Some say, I feel close to the Lyrians. What about them? Some say the Arcturians just parked in their backyard in Boulder. Some say, you know, Lalana, who is here, Lalana Rose, says that she is visited by Syrians in her dreams, and there's a lot of resonance with it, and that's only on Zoom. I haven't checked the other 2 channels that we're streaming on, so I think we're rocking it, and so please do go on.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll give you guys the headlines on these, and then we can talk about a few others too. So the Shiheli, while lesser known, are very, very deep and important to me, because it was my first lifetime in a humanoid body in this galaxy, was as Shiheli. And I went through a very, very intense experience of having the exact same dream every single night for 3 nights straight, with the exact same things that happened. And my dream was basically my memory from that lifetime, a huge portion of what happened for me in that lifetime. And after having these 3 days of dreams in which I'd had all of these experiences and was processing through them all, I went back to Asheville, North Carolina. I was in California at the time when this happened, working with a few different people on a very special project. And I went back to North Carolina, and one of my friends came up to me at this party, and he says to me, "Oh my God, Adam, we need to go sit by the fire together. I've been having these dreams." And I was like, okay. And so we go and we end up sitting by the fire together sometime later. And he starts describing to me word for word some of the things like that I exactly experienced. And basically both of us had been Shiheli and captured as children and taken and enslaved on this lava moon to this reptilian species. And basically we're mining meteorites and driving these giant mech warrior like robot vehicles that we were using to do the mining. And as we shared, and I shared with him my memories, and he shared with me more of his, and he filled in tons of gaps in my piece, we realized we'd remembered the exact same life and time together on that life, and how we escaped and what we did and how we got back home, and all of these things. And also I had a couple other friends who were there in that lifetime too, who he and I were able to identify because we both saw qualities in them that resonated with our memories. And then of course I reached out to them and told them the story, and they remembered fully and shared more pieces of that story with me as well. And so through that very direct personal journey of experience with that time, I came to know who I was as a Shiheli. And the Shiheli are very much martial artists. They have two planets, a desert planet and an Earth-like planet, and traveled between the two planets. And there's a lot of kind of archetypal similarities in the story Dune that Frank Herbert wrote with the nature of the Shiheli, and of course of the Orion Wars as well, and that whole period of time. But in particular, a few of the qualities that are easily recognizable are that Shiheli are deeply integrated in terms of how they know their body is a vehicle for movement and movement art. Shiheli are often martial artists at the deepest level. They're dancers. They're good with weapons, good with all kinds of tools and objects. And a lot of the qualities of the Shiheli culture came to Earth through the Orient, and we find a lot of the qualities in Taoism, in ancient Shaolin records and Shaolin knowledge. We find aspects of those cultures and of their histories, mythologies, and information bases and healing methodologies, etc., that are all based from the Shiheli culture and were brought to this planet. I have a friend who was working with Shaolin temples for many years, and the monks in a few of these temples in the Himalayas had decided recently to pull out these very, very ancient scrolls that were kept in the bottoms of these temples. And the ancient scrolls were actually educational diagrams and teachings about how martial arts intersects with jumping between star systems. Literally, they'd have diagrams of stepping in different ways, activating constellation patterns through particular steps, and how each of the points in the body, the meridian points in the body, are actually like gateways that link to different star systems. And there's a huge amount of information there. And of course, if you study Taoist alchemy and you get really deep into it, you start to see that the library of knowledge there is very galactic, and it's extremely complex and in-depth, and the understanding of cycles and time patterns and the gates in the body, it's just extremely advanced. And so the Shiheli carry with them this sort of understanding that the body and energy is a system, and it's a system that can very much function like a machine, and you can enhance it in certain ways, and you can also let it go in different ways, and it's all about a game of balance and testing and challenging yourself and pushing the limits of what you're capable of. Most Shiheli that I've met here on Earth who came here because of their desire for guardianship of this planet, and decided that it's gonna be messy. So when we go to Earth, let's go as guardians. Let's go and let's show up with our skills and our talents, and let's work to protect the sovereignty of all life and all beings. And a lot of Shiheli are by nature these galactic guardians. And in the journey of the stories that I tell about the Shiheli, you come to understand why, because of these relationships with other beings that happened during the Orion Wars. And at some point, I'm going to redo this whole presentation that I do about that time. But if you're really hungry to find out and you're really strongly resonating with the stuff I'm talking about, you can just look up The Real Star Wars, Adam Apollo. And there's an interview that I did with Alfred Weber of Exopolitics many years ago. It's a very long, 3-hour long download session where I'm presenting on the history of the galaxy, the secret history of the galaxy itself. So it's a big journey, but it's worthwhile. And you can just skip through Alfred's, intro and stuff, which takes a little while, and jump straight into the presentation and the good stuff. But I'll redo that one at some point. But if you're very hungry for the information, it's there. And I believe it's also on my galacticfamily.net site as well. But yeah, it's pretty easy for Shiheli to know themselves and each other, because it's just this instant like warrior bond, like galactic samurai, like Jedi, like you're designed to be a guardian and a warrior at the deepest level in your being, and you can't shake it. There's nothing you can do to remove it. It's not like you can lax it. You'll no matter what you do, you will find yourself desiring to move faster and smarter and better, and it's huge. Yahonians come from a world that's very similar to Dagobah in the Star Wars series, where we see Yoda comes from. Marshlands, deep jungle. And the Yahonian people in particular have physical qualities a lot like, example I like to use is Nigerian, because of very, very dark skin, very tall, and yet very graceful and elegant and dexterous, so to speak. And the Yahonians, because their homeworld is so rich with life, so rich with different plants and animals, they had dedicated their lives to the study of the medicine in all different kinds of life. And so every plant is a form of medicine. Every plant has a different communication to us. And every plant has something to teach us. And so as we, open up to the teaching of the plants around us, we start to discover that no matter what it is that we need and where it is that we're at, there's always some medicine that can help us with whatever situation we're facing. They're incredible allies. And a lot of the very deep, transformative healing medicines that we have here on Earth are actually from the Yahonian world. Ayahuasca is one, iboga is another. Many of the strains of different psychedelic mushrooms that we have on this planet are from the Yahonian system. And the Yahonian people learned a long time ago that, trees and life act as antennas. And so some of the early star travelers of the Yahonian people, they would sit inside of a tree and meditate and connect to the antenna of the tree to augment the scale of their body's energy awareness. And then they would literally astrally project using the tree as a support body, and travel around the stars. And they started traveling and meeting with other star species that are on ships and on other planets and stuff. And they would come in on the astral very strong. And a lot of existing galactic technology is developed to such an extent that if there's a very strong presence in the etheric field, that's coming from somebody's astral body being present or whatever, there are ways to augment that so that they can actually display holographically and etc. more of the qualities of a spirit or a being that's present in that space. And so the Yahonias would show up, and the people on the ships would be like, "Whoa, hi, who are you? Wow, you're really here. You're really strongly here. Like, what planet are you from? Like, what do you teach?" And so there was all these relationships that started being built with the Ionian people, who would just come and hang out, and then they would tell these different galactic species about specific medicines and give them certain gifts of, healing methodologies and things like that. And it didn't take long before the rest of the galactic community realized that the Ionians had already integrated very well with their planet. They didn't have wars, they didn't have tribal battles, they explored deeply spiritually, they astral traveled extremely proficiently, were pretty telepathic, and so it was very easy for them to transition to being one of these galactic council species. And some areas of Ionia, have pyramid structures too, a lot like Mayan pyramids and the jungles that we see here on Earth. And they've developed advanced technology, but the real technology that they study and that they work to share with people is the technology of plants, is the technology of the living medicine that's all around us. And so a lot of Ionians here on Earth, they just have an innate desire to collect herbs, collect tinctures, collect, essential oils. And usually they've got libraries of all of them, and they know what all of them do. And they innately have the sense of all the things. Yeah, that's just sitting right in front of you, isn't it? Right? It's like never far away.
But I have 2 other baskets near my bed.
Yeah. Nice. Amazing. See, I don't have that. So that's beautiful.
Do continue. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So medicine keepers, and if you've ever done ayahuasca, I think you probably have had a very direct experience of what Ionian medicine is really all about, which is like, man, accept it all. Like, get in there, get into the rootiest dirt of your being, and then open it up, and there's all this light inside. There's all this beauty inside. So the last I'll share of these 6 very humanoid species who have invested a lot of souls to Earth and genetics to Earth would be the Laquinan, or Laquinanuninanunea. And this people are a little different because their star went supernova a long time ago. And when their star went supernova, what that means is that it had grown into a red giant and then eventually burned up enough of its core materials that the whole structure basically collapsed and exploded. And as it exploded and went supernova, it wiped out the planets in its system. And what they had done was, prior to this happening, they developed the level of self-knowledge and skill and technology in relationship to energy and to the physical and to the spiritual worlds, that they realized that they could actually keep their planet intact on the astral plane and leverage the energy burst of the star to actually enhance the planet's capacity to hold itself together and be an energetic information beacon for the rest of the galaxy. And so they crafted technology that literally would help them transition their planet to being a planet made of light, like literally cities of light, like a planet made of energy on the etheric plane and the astral plane that, has some physical qualities. And this star that went supernova, which was their star, we call Cassiopeia A. And Cassiopeia A is the brightest and loudest radio beacon in the entire sky. And this is because it's a major astral information routing system that's designed to capture information from all over the galaxy and route it throughout the galaxy. Kind of like if you were to sort of physically or energetically embody what the Akashic records would look like, this is what the Laquinan world actually is and does. And the Laquinan learned well before this happened, and in this process of ascending, so to speak, or moving into this place where they're physical but also non-physical, they develop the ability to change back and forth whenever they want. So they have the ability to become physical, take body on, and become non-physical. And there's stories about them in the ancient Vedic writings. And these beings that are able to form bodies and release bodies. And I see you smiling super brightly over there. Get some resonance.
Girl to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the specific cultural qualities of the Laquenon as elders of the around for a long time, they developed these very high, very spiritual technologies of selfhood, and have been guides to many, many different species for a long time. And one of the ways that they learn and they practice and they develop sort of archetypal formulas for how things can unfold, to predict what's going to happen, to see through time better. And the way they've done that is they literally create scenarios in which they smash together archetypes that normally don't go together. So if you've ever seen, someone like Dinotopia, right? You remember the book Dinotopia that was released? No? Okay, so Dinotopia is an example of this kind of Laquenon exploration, where you take, a semi-medieval human time period and race, and then you just take dinosaurs and you just shove them together and now see what happens. Or like sometimes certain steampunk stories are like this. So now what happens when you take, early industrial civilization with airships, with some other kind of advanced magic technology, and you shove those together? Or what would happen if you took, people in the Middle Ages and you took people right now, in a city, and you suddenly smashed them together? So you have like a castle on this hill and you've got a city in this valley, and now all these people are coming together. How does it resolve? Like, what happens? Like, how do people deal with that and each other? Stories where people are showing us that, because when you push together lines, you push together natural qualities, you push together different archetypes of being and ways of being, it forces consciousness to innovate itself. It forces consciousness to evolve itself into a new way of thinking that's able to somehow encompass both of these totally strange and different archetypes. And that is the work of the Laquenon, evolving consciousness through taking the most different and drastically separate sorts of fields of consciousness or archetypes of consciousness that we can think of, and bringing those together and exploring what the alchemy is for how that differentiation resolves itself back into oneness. And so a lot of Laquenon that I've met on Earth, they have these vast, amazing libraries of stories and archetypes in their minds. And they've often had visions of just like all kinds of different things that don't seem to normally fit together, but somehow do in them. And it's part of these kinds of archetypal games that they've played. And they tend to be very, very good also at identifying specific groups, specific archetypes. And so, in things like business, they're great at identifying demographics and groups of people based on what certain qualities those people share. So those 6 species, and I know that was like a long journey, but I hope it was worthwhile to those of you that have decided to stick around and listen in. Were really like the first 6 that I got to know very deeply so that I could better understand Earth's history and how we got to where we are right now. And so that I could help people to understand that these are not just beings out there. These are beings right here, like on Earth, together. It's us. And that we're actually resolving differences and coming through this transformation and in this great experiment of what it's like to all be the same species, very different, but the same species on the same planet, without Star Tech, you know, without ships and without free energy systems. And how do we deal with all of these challenges of consciousness and scarcity? And oh my God, you know, it's crazy. Like, what are we doing here? But it's beautiful too, and so special, because as we face these challenges and as we grow together and as we come to this time where now we are going to go galactic, we are going to go travel the stars and join these species, we're doing so with so much new experience and so much new creativity and innovation and ideas. And we have this wealth of being that we're going to bring to the rest of this galactic community. It's not just that they all are out there with all of this high wisdom that they're there to teach us. It's that the gifts of humanity are precious and crucial to the evolution of consciousness for all beings across the universe.
Yes, and every leap we've made on this planet has been highly monitored by intergalactic civilizations, as
For sure.
now. And
For sure.
they're learning so much from us, and each huge global meditation that we're doing, that is sending ripples and ripples and ripples of prayer and love and light into the atmosphere and beyond, is actually enhancing the whole galactic system, like it did now on April 4th. And tomorrow we have a new one with Unify, and you are a part of Unify, and thank you for founding that peace organization. And we're discussing it now. It might be tomorrow on 5/5, so May 5 at 11:11 Pacific Daytime. We're
Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo, huh?
I don't understand. Sorry.
Oh, Cinco de Mayo is a.
Cinco de Mayo. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah. Okay.
And Lalana is asking, what would it take to be able to live amongst infinite diversity peacefully? Because even if you look at races here on Earth, like, not to mention intergalactically, but even here we look at Black people saying, why are they Black? Or we invented names for the skin of the Chinese who are yellow, or the Amerindians, or so much craziness with diversity that is not accepted, or diversity in sexual preferences, or diversity in food preferences, and whether to eat or not. That in the first place is not fully accepted. What if they turn up and show up, and they're looking completely different from us? And how would humanity react? And it's time to be prepared for that, because they're starting to show up. I have a very short beginning of a movie that's called Valerian, the planet of 1,000 suns, or something like that. That is
City of 1,000 Worlds, I think.
The City of 1,000 Worlds, yes.
Yeah.
That is my favorite display of an intergalactic gathering. And I've just found it. I was searching for it while you were speaking, to just present a display of how it actually looks like to meet other species and be okay with it. Would it be okay for me to share screen with you?
Of course. Yeah, please do. All right. Show and tell time.
Just to okay, I'm exercising with this because it's
well, while you're setting that up, the gentleman that wrote that story and created this film, Valerian, he actually wrote it, and also another story called The Fifth Element when he was young, and he was in his teens. And he the story goes, and I'm just going off of like
Uh, I don't hear you anymore.
His name's Luc Besson, and he supposedly had these different visions, and he was trying to capture these visions that he'd had of galactic civilization in the future, and somehow translate those into film. And it took most of his life to get to a point where technology was advanced enough that he could do it. And The Fifth Element was the first film that he put out that reflected these visions that he'd had. And The Fifth Element is one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen it many times. It's still, every time I watch it, it's still always one of my absolute favorites. Highly recommended if you guys haven't seen it. But then Valerian as well. And while Valerian is not one of my favorite films, because there were certain things I think that could have been done a lot better, it does have a lot of really powerful information in it. And the different things that are being shown in the movie are connected to things that I've seen related to different galactic species and stuff. So I just wanted to share that because, this is someone who got a bunch of downloads as a young kid and wrote them down and then eventually turned them into these amazing movies. And so, don't sell yourself short. If you're someone who has visions and has been getting downloads about things, like, it may just take some time for you to integrate it to a point where you're ready to share it. So why don't you share with us this clip from Valerian if you're ready? Do you got it?
Yes, I got it.
Okay.
And it should be starting. Let me see how I do this.
All right.
Is it visible to you?
Yep, I can see it. Yeah. Oh.
Internet maybe it doesn't work so well.
That's okay. You could probably just mute the audio because it's not coming through very clearly. But yeah, definitely getting the visuals. And of course, we love the song,
Okay.
Ground control to Major Tom. Yeah.
You can do the audio and while display. And check out also.
Yeah. These guys are cool. They're in The Fifth Element, actually, this crew. These guys are guardians of the pyramids, and I don't know about these cats. These are some interesting. Those are mostly just suits that you're seeing. I think they're just in humanoid-like suits. Those guys are super cute.
It takes courage to be a part of this, no?
Yeah, see, those guys are kind of like fishermen, but they wear a humanoid body suit so that they can hang out in their liquid and still pilot these things. So, and that's a good thing to point to too. There's a lot of species that are not very humanoid, but that have different technologies they've learned to be able to work with different humanoid races and move around more easily, and that kind of thing. I found also, since we're, the whole point of this interview, you called it intergalactic species. Well, most of the species that I've tracked and done a lot of work with are this galaxy, and everyone I've mentioned so far is kind of based in this galaxy. But I have had some work with other species of other galaxies, and in particular those of Andromeda, because Andromeda is pretty close by. It's much more a challenge to jump to different galaxies than it is to jump within a galaxy, because there are certain technological challenges and limitations around that, because you have to have some information base about where you're jumping to. Now, doing it astrally or doing it, through consciousness is one thing, but if you're trying to take a ship, it's a much more it's a much bigger ordeal. And I talk about this some in some of my presentations on galactic technology. Like I think I got into it in the one I did with Portal to Ascension. And I think all my talks on Portal to Ascension are still open and free right now for anybody to watch if they want to. But yeah, intergalactic species, from Andromeda, there's a few different beings that I've tracked that have come through and have presences here. And one of them is several of them have very animal characteristics, but are humanoid. Like, for example, the elephant beings of Andromeda. And the way we see them here on Earth is through statues of Ganesha, for example.
Yeah.
These beings that have the very elephant-like characteristics, but have humanoid-like form and seem to be hyper intelligent about how to move through obstacles, like how to take anything that's a limiting factor and turn it into a power or a benefit. And beyond Ganesha, a good friend of mine, his name's Perry, created this this whole sort of spiritual journey phenomena called Appa, the dancing elephant. And he had these visions of this like golden elephant being, and she was very feminine, who would dance and spin and dance. And as she would dance, energy would like open up and clear and the whole field would change. And he started creating these little yellow stickers for Appa the dancing elephant. And you probably have seen them around because they're literally all over the world. He's made hundreds of thousands of these stickers. And there's literally, he has photos of these stickers that people have sent him from like the tops of temples in the Himalayas, to the middle of Siberia, to like the mountains in Europe, to Norway and the fjords, to like everywhere. This little elephant has traveled the world and is all over the world. And I can tell you, I've had some very powerful experiences with Appa where, for one example, is we had an RV, big diesel engine on our way out to Burning Man. Somebody turned off the RV. It wouldn't start again because sometimes the glow plug, like if you're not careful and you shut it off, you have to wait a while for things to cool and then it will start. And we were like late in our time frame and we're like trying to get the RV started. It just wouldn't start. Nothing we do would do anything, wouldn't even turn over. And then we get this vision of Appa like dancing around the RV. So we go out of the RV and we just start dancing around the RV and imagining we're Appa, this golden elephant. And we just literally danced around the RV for like a few minutes. And we're like, Vacha, try it. He goes inside and he like hits the thing. It starts right up. And it's just a really powerful reminder that sometimes joy force and bliss, dancing, ecstatic expression can be one of the most powerful obstacle clearers that we have to work with. Another species that I have personal relationship with because of my own soul journey are the dragons in Andromeda. And the dragons there are in many ways akin to and a lot like the dragons that are mapped out in the Dungeons and Dragons games that we have here on Earth. And there's entire books that they have about all of the different kinds of dragons. And I'd say that, to some extent, the people that brought through that information and were working on this, I sense probably innately have a connection with these dragons themselves, because many of them and many of the artists who draw them and paint them do an amazing job. There's illustrations of dragons that are less accurate, which is usually the ones where they're like red-eyed and like, bleh, and like, think of much more elegant, much more extremely smart, extremely capable, wise eyes, and in many ways very gentle, not destructive beings that are very in tune with the elements and the harmony of nature. And there's an artist whose name is Gugu Troll, Gugu Troll, Troll. I know it's odd, but if you look at her work, or I think it's a her, on DeviantArt, you'll see depictions of dragons that are truly beautiful and really, really well capture the nature and the kinds of beings that the dragons are in Andromeda. And as a little kind of tip for those of you that are strongly interested and resonant with dragons, and that, you know, have kind of mixed feelings about the judgments of reptilians, for example, and things like that, I will share one little piece of the story, which is that, you know, a long time ago, the Arcturians, as genetic editors as they are, wanted to bridge the dragon peoples with the humanoid peoples. And so to do that, what they did is they took DNA from dragons, they brought it back to our galaxy, and they set up a planet where they started an experiment of what it would be like to have these humanoid dragon hybrids. Those humanoid dragon hybrids of variety of different humanoid species and different dragon species coming together is a species that became what we call reptilians, or that's commonly channeled and translated as the reptilians. And at first, the experiment seemed like it was going to go well, but there was one major problem. The problem was they never asked the dragons for permission. And so because they never got permission from the dragons, and they also didn't know something about the dragons, which is that dragon beings incarnate into their own descendants. So they'll tend to incarnate, like if I passed away, I would incarnate directly into my great grandson's family, you know, and I leapfrog through my own family, keeping my bloodline strong, keeping my connection in my family strong. It's just one of the ways that they work with families and relationships, right? And so now imagine, you know, and the way that they follow that track is through the genetic energy field. So now imagine you get your DNA stolen and taken to another galaxy, and then, you know, your great grandfather passes away, and you're expecting that great grandfather's soul to incarnate again into, you know, your daughter's, you know, family. And instead you tune into their soul, and suddenly they're incarnating in another galaxy and another planet. And you can feel them in fear and in rage and in anger because they're incarnating and they're lost. They don't know where they are. Their memory capacity is not as good because they're partially humanoid, and humanoids tend to forget a lot when they incarnate, you know, like it's just the nature of our wetware, right? And like, and so here's all of these high level dragon elders that are suddenly incarnating in this other galaxy, and you can feel the pain and the rage and all of this stuff. And so, you know, what happened was there was this huge dragon council, and some of the dragon families were super pissed and decided to literally rip their bodies apart, travel to the other galaxy, incarnate as these reptilian beings, and take revenge out on all of these humanoids that had done this to them, and teach them a lesson, you know, slaughter them, show them who's boss. And this was just, you know, it was a massive trauma. It was like the pain of losing your family and then going to get your family back. And like, how could they do this to us? It was dishonor at this very, very, very deep level. And there was others that, like my family and a lot of my community, that felt like it was very wrong to just go to this other galaxy and start destroying life and destroying people. And so for us, what we did instead was we decided to study these beings in this other galaxy by astrally traveling here and studying many of these humanoid races and understand them and understand why they had done this and what they were interested in. And what we discovered was that most of them had no idea this even happened. And it was only a small group of Arcturians that had started this whole experiment, and they didn't know that it was going to go this wrong. And so we decided to leave our bodies and travel as souls to this galaxy and incarnate into these weird, fleshy humanoids and very soft, pudgy little things that we are, and to protect them and to incarnate into races that could protect the other species from the onslaught of these dragon lords who had incarnated as reptilians and who had already forgotten why they'd even come and why they were even angry, and were raging across, the galaxy. And so that's why I incarnated as Shiheli, because Shihelio was one of the first star systems close by to where this planet was, and it was one of the first planets to get raided when the reptilians began to travel to other worlds and raid other worlds. And so I share that story because it's important to understand this, that there's no such thing as just a good species or a bad species. There's no such thing like as, you don't just say, oh yeah, all humans are evil. Like, you don't. Or you don't say all Japanese people are good or all Japanese people are bad. You just don't do that, because it's not true. It's never going to be true. Like, the reality is that there's trauma and there's patterns of experience that lead people and beings to do dark things. And sometimes that's just part of the greater lesson and part of the conscious evolution of a being and part of their greater journey as a species. And so for the reptilians, it's not that they're evil. It's that some of them have this, as Lalana says, intergalactic trauma. And some of them got so deeply intertwined in their own karma and sanskaras from the way they behaved from that action, that they've restricted and they've blocked out parts of their memory to such an extent that they're continue to manifest the same levels of trauma over and over again. They're caught in hell, so to speak. They're in a loop of their own darkness. And for those of us that have been through any dark night of the soul and a dark time in your life, you gain compassion for that. You realize, like, wow, a lot of the evil that we see in this world is really because people are hurting really badly. And it's important for us to have the perspective of how it's possible that we could heal those rifts, how it's possible that we could actually restore peace through healing this wound. And the dragon wound is a really, really big one. And I like to call it the dragon key, which is when you understand that certain people have lost the sense of how big they are, how powerful they actually are, because they used to be these big, gigantic, powerful dragon beings. And now they're in these tiny humanoid bodies, and they judge themselves, and they're used to being big and powerful and etc. So what they're trying to do all the time is prove to themselves and to others how powerful they are. They're trying to prove to themselves that they are the beings that they already are. But the only way to do that is sometimes through the act of taking power from others. They believe that they have to somehow gain power over others to prove to themselves that they're really powerful. And so the dragon key is realizing that you are already powerful, that you are already a dragon, you are already an amazing being. It doesn't matter that you're incarnated in a little body, and that no power you ever take over somebody else will ever actually increase your power and self-knowledge. The only way to true power is through yourself, through owning and acknowledging your infinite, eternal, and powerful being. And this is a huge healing mechanism for a lot of the trauma and the pain that we've been experiencing on Earth, because it's about transcending the idea that somehow power and force comes from taking it, that instead power truly emerges through the self-awakening, through the realization of who we are in ourselves. And that ends the need for violence towards others or through forcibly taking power from anybody else, because you don't ever need to. You always have more than enough within you. So anyway, a little bit on the intergalactic dragon species. And yes, love is always the answer.
Love is always the answer, and love is always the biggest power. And as far as I remember, the dragon beings knew that. So for those who want to dive deeper, I believe I don't have too much reading on the dragon species, but one book that fell into my hands accidentally, coming from Jasmine, was the Sophia Codes. I don't know if you guys read that, but it depicts quite a very deep, image of the dragon species and how they operate and how they're really beings of love, as opposed to how they're depicted here. We
Yeah.
are beings of love. And I loved what you shared about the genetic mixing in the species of the dragons with humanoids. Your story really is offering us a powerful insight on the importance of not playing God, because we don't know it all and we have no clue what
Sure.
we're doing, and mixing genes and mixing and cloning beings and so on. This is not something to play with, and it can lead to big disruption in the soul's journey, and in incarnation journeys, and in our connection to source eventually. That is the most important thing. And I'm very happy that now William Brown has joined us. He is quite a good representative of genetics knowledge here, and it's the colleague of Adam and of us all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So thank you for sharing this such in depth, and you feel free to add whatever comes next. No.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure and an honor to be exploring this knowledge with all of you and to be here with all of you. So thank you so much for showing up and for going on this journey. Yeah, I think that probably, for today we've covered a lot of major things that I think, people will have some tools to go a little bit deeper in this exploration for themselves from this point in time. And I just want to invite people to really explore what resonances are within them, and those resonances exist at a genetic level where we can actually feel certain information structures in our body that, by nature of their vibration and their information structure, I think are innately entangled to information structures through time. And there's a magic to this, because as we get to know these different parts of ourselves, we get to know our ancestry better, but we also get to know our soul journey a little bit better. And William and I have talked about this, but I believe that we have what is called like a soul genome as well as a physiological genome, and that the soul genome is sort of the energetic level of our genetic information that we're carrying with us and evolving in each one of our incarnations. As our consciousness moves through time, it has its own sort of DNA construct to it. And then when we incarnate into a body, the physiological DNA that we have is not just a combination of our mother and our father's genome. It's a combination of our parents' genomes and our own soul genome. And our soul genome will affect the epigenetic signaling of our body's incarnation. So certain genes will be turned on and off dependent on what our deeper soul construct has chosen in terms of how we incarnate, which is why we will carry certain aspects of our looks and certain aspects of our personalities across different lifetimes, because that's part of our whole soul's information structure or soul genome that's stayed intact. And also that's an area where our experiences in our lives as we go throughout our lives are actually tuning and changing the information structure inside of our DNA. And that's the driver towards evolution, because some of that becomes very hard-coded ancestral DNA that then passes to our kids and our kids' kids and so on. And other parts of that just get integrated as our soul DNA. And we carry that on into further lifetimes. And this is really what is meant by this whole idea of the 12 strands of DNA and that kind of thing. Because physically, there isn't a braid of 12 different strands and amino acids linking all of those all meshed together. That's not real on the physical level. We don't have that. We can look at DNA. It's possible for us to actually see DNA, and we don't see DNA that looks like that, right? So we're not talking about physical 12 strands, but the idea that you have 5 additional pairs of strands that are interwoven with your DNA is a metaphysical concept that I think is pointing very clearly to what I'm talking about, which is that you have a sort of energetic DNA at all different levels. And a lot of what I map in my unified harmonic matrix work, and for those of you that want to check out that presentation, it's on YouTube. You can just search Unified Harmonic Matrix. There's a really old one from 2012. Don't watch that one. Just watch the new one. It links to the new one. But the new one is from last year at Contact in Desert, and Ruben Langdon, amazing filmmaker, helped capture it for me, and my friend Maya helped edit it and everything. And it came together very well, and it very clearly depicts this sort of geometric information structure based on harmonic resonances that relates us and connects us to space-time. And this is a really good map to come at this understanding of these sort of higher dimensional genomes that are part of us, and that are aspects of our beings and different levels and layers of our beings, but that which also play out in our actual biology and genetics here, in each incarnation that we have.
That's amazing. You've wrapped it up quite elegantly. What can I say? Let's bring some
Thanks.
science on the DNA and for the newcomers. I love your talk. I mean, it was great. And I want to point out 2 things that just come to me, is that to bring this back home to the general theme of the festival, is that because we're beings of light or beings of high consciousness coming from so many different species, as you've learned tonight, we do have the ability in certain systems that is developing now also on Earth to be nourished in a different way and to master our bodies and bodies of light in a different way, which is specific for each species. So that's what allows us to be nourished by prana to some degree or fully, and it's because it's a memory which is ingrained in our systems from the civilizations that we're part of that don't need physical food as nourishment. And also here on Earth, there's been, as far as I remember, times when we didn't need that so much. And also, if you look at this festival and see so many speakers sharing so many different possibilities, is because maybe each one of them is coming from a different culture of how to be nourished in that way. And that's why the methods are, and the opinions and the points of view are so diverse. And that's why I brought them all together. Because
thank you.
To some degree, I feel connected to all of them and have memories from several. So I know that everything is possible. And also we invite people to not only look at themselves and others as galactic species, but also look at your pets maybe and the animals around you that are on this planet, that may have come to this planet to experience the 3D or planet Earth world, as you call it, and they have the right to that experience as well. And if you look at them, you can sometimes see that they do have consciousness, that they do have emotions, that they do have telepathic abilities, like your dog knows when you're going to come home, or animals are knowing when they're going to be killed and eaten. And that's important to assess when you're choosing your food as well. And
True
some
that.
of the species are not to be eaten, and none of the species are to be eaten. So I invite humans to also look at that when they choose their diet, and give the right to other species on this planet to experience this planet as much as we do, because some do it in a wiser way than we do also.
Mm-hmm.
That's still the cherry on the cake. Thank you so much, Adam, to be with us and share
Mm-hmm.
so dearly. This is the
Mm.
one of the dearest conferences that we had so far. And I don't know if there's still the possibility to take questions or comments in the audience, but I feel you've already shared more than we expected, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Yeah. What time is it?
It's been 2 hours and 20 together.
Yeah, I should call it because I have a couple other things I need to get to today. But yeah, please feel free to to go to galacticfamily.net if you're wanting to look and learn more about different star species. Post in the comments, ask questions there. You can always get in touch with me through my Instagram at Adam_Apollo, where I do a lot of different downloads. And also just find me if you Google my name or go to adamapollo.com. You can learn more about my work, and I have lots of online courses as well through Guardian Alliance, and as well as I wrote a lot of the Unified Science program in the Resonance Academy. So it's a great place. It's free now. It's opened up. It's a great place to really learn about the physics of the universe and how that relates to consciousness and relates to where we're going on the planet. I assisted William a little bit with Module 6, which is amazing. It's a view into the future of like where our technology is really going, and how unified physics plays into that. So it's really great work. And I have another course there called Quantum Geometry as well, which is open. And then the Guardian Alliance is a great place if you're into Jedi training, self-mastery training, getting to know the archetypes of your own embodiment on this planet, and how you can master different skills and integrate those different skills, and bring your spirituality into a more cohesive whole and grounded, sort of anchored approach to making change in yourself and in the world. So those are all places that you can find more and explore some more. And I'll continue doing these live sessions and with different groups, and I look forward to seeing you guys on a future one.
We'll be happy to meet again. And as somebody is saying now in the comments, may the force be with you.
Blessed be. Thank you so much.
Bless you, Adam, for your help and your presence here on the planet with us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure.
And thank you everyone for being with us. Thank you, Gaston and Lalana, and all the ones who have posted in the comments, and all the ones in these streams, wherever you are. We'll be having next meetings and you'll be informed by email. This week we also have on Wednesday the Prana, Intimacy and Kundalini class, so stay tuned to my Facebook to see details on that. And on Thursday we start the new pranic process online, which takes you to 8 days of detox and energizations with me and my team. See you soon. Thank you very much. Big hugs.
Beautiful. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.